the day, and Sam is a design researcher during the day, but has had his time in architectural practice as well. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're coming in, macam you might see these type of projects as quite wild, but macam we have, I would say, both feet in both worlds lah, within
Yeah.
maybe the conceptual realm and also the building practice realm. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important for us to say that, because sometimes when you come out of degree, it's not viable to start off something which is not entirely feasible financially.
Mm.
So, but I think it's good to get the experience of actually building things in real life and knowing how
Yeah.
things work, knowing how things are run in practices, so that that informs the future growth of what you do lah. Yeah.
Yeah, for us, I think it's not an either or thing. So we try to kind of
Hmm.
balance both worlds in a sense, or at
Hmm.
least try to take something what we learn out of our experience in building practice, and because there is something to learn anyway, and going forward into trying to create an alternative practice,
Hmm. Hmm.
which we're still figuring out day by day, but we just kind of go with it.
Hmm. Correct.
Yeah. So yeah, basically we kind of, like I said, we've crossed into disciplines of like design, art, and architecture, and we're very interested in like that highlighted yellow area where it intersects, and most of our projects probably exist in that realm of space.
Hmm.
Yeah. Next. So to our yeah, we titled our talk as towards a so basically like there are many like different lenses or like viewpoints of how we kind of unpack narratives into our project or impart some sort of idea into it. So the
Hmm.
first part is like towards a new narrative. Next. So what we usually do, like for like how we approach a project, we usually find like threads of ideas like about a certain issue or a certain topic that we're interested in that we would like to investigate and maybe respond to, because I mean we're living in this world, and I think we are, and I think even as normal architects, we when you execute a project for a building project, you respond to what's there, right? So actually what we do is not that different from when you do a building project. Cuma you are a bit more investigative with how you do how you intend to do things like during that conceptual stage. But the difference is that the product is not limited to just a building. So instead, like it can come out into different various things, like media or an object or just a drawing. And yeah, so these many threads that we try to pull, or we try to weave it into like a coherent story that uh, that what product that we produce will sort of live on its own and carry its meaning. Yeah, next. So essentially, we're trying to create a new perspective of seeing whatever it is that we are trying to convey or talk about, or trying to bring forth into people's view, the public view. So trying to present a new way of seeing something, like a new way of looking at an issue that in a way that is not always conventional or something that's controversial. Maybe, like, media presents certain topics in one way, but sometimes it's not always true. Sometimes it's maybe biased towards an agenda by whoever or whatever, right? So in a way, we try to reframe things, either to challenge it or to try to bring new meaning. And from our work, it's not to say like this is this, it's to kind of open it up to new interpretations by us, but also by the audience who read into our work. So next. So basically this is like just a diagram of like the stuff that of like at least the web diagram of how we to define us, I guess, in a way. So we're very much interested in fabrication making as our mode of investigating. So we like to make stuff, produce it into something or anything. Can be small scale things, and we're also into the local context of Malaysia, our local scene, as our cultural reference in a way, because I think that's also something because we both relate to it, and we feel at home with it in a sense, and we want to present it in a different way than what others have probably looked at it. Sometimes, like, because you're from there, you kind of think that it's nothing special, but what if we try to make be more proud of it or something, and represent things into something special that is that people can relate to, essentially.
Yeah, true, true. But just basically macam knowing that you're a part of this environment and acknowledging what's around you lah. Macam I think we realize that there needs to be a lot more localized views coming from design. I think we're so used to homogeneity. When you look at design, everything looks the same now almost. So I think we've lost that. I think from Malaysia, our perspective on the way we see things uniquely lah, to our lens.
Yeah. It's also just to be able to relate with, like where we are right now. And, we tend to have more, maybe the Western viewpoint, which is not a bad thing, but cuma like, how do we bring that back and, do something nice for, our home and stuff like that. So one of like our references or like artists that we like is Madeline Riesendorp. She's the ex-wife of Ren Koolhaas, and she did all the most, if not the most famous paintings that appeared in Ome's work, which was Exodus and Delirious New York. So she was behind all those drawings. But we also like her idea of this collection of like weird stuff that she has. So wherever she goes, she collects things from that she just found very peculiar. And basically what she does is that she tries to sort this out in her home in different ways, but into her own language of curation. So she's trying to create her own meaning between these many different objects that she felt or connected with or have personal attachment to. So it's basically what we're trying to impart, or what we try to do is also do that. Like there are certain things like objects or topics that maybe might not go together in the most like traditional sense, but we try to create meaning between that gray area there. So that is like a method that we learned from her as well. Next. So this is also something that we relate from the design architecture office solid objectives, SOIL. How then might we meaningfully organize matters in our increasingly volatile world? It is in human nature to reduce in an attempt to understand complexity, yet new terrain lies in the random, the subjective, the intuitive, and the foreign. So basically what I've mentioned before, it's finding or trying to find that putting in your own meaning into basically what you find in your selection of objects or topics that you like. There can be new meaning that you would want to try to create and impart or investigate. So the conclusion is that you should find your own way of seeing. So when we talk about architecture projects, and there's a topic that you're interested in or you want to address, you should try and define like what is it about it that you are interested in. Is it like materiality or the social issue that surrounds around it, or historical issues? And then you sort of use your creative and designer skills to find your own way of seeing that project, or producing something that can allow for other people to see it in a different light. Next. So seeing through, this is the sort of like the next chapter of our talk in a sense. Next. So we like to see through the banal. So by this, it's like seeing or looking at the everyday objects or everyday things in a different way, because sometimes the banal has something in it, like you can question it. Why is it that way? Or, take interest in it and unpack it, basically, find something there. Next. Sam? Okay. So I mean, this was actually like a strong reference image for our proposal for the Venice Biennale that we attempted to try and send off. So basically, this was like looking. This is kind of, yeah. So basically, the developers, they're sarcastically stating that, who says we don't allocate space for recreation, but clearly there's something wrong here. Like it's criticizing what the developers do and what they actually do, and yeah, it's pretty much that. Next. So I think this is also referencing about like our interest in local culture. So like we like to identify or like take interest into like the aesthetic of the current Malaysian culture context, like from the low culture to the high culture, like traditional sort of languages and elements, and but also like into the contemporary, like all these memes and all these stuff that basically the youth, or at least the younger generation, or the pop culture people are like consuming. So I think they all are very relevant, so it's not about one being over the another. So this is what we like to reference to sort of like bring maybe a sense of humor, but also something that is to help make it more relatable when we do local projects. So a quote from Susan Sontag: another effect, time contracts the sphere of banality. Banality is, strictly speaking, always a category of the contemporary. What was banal can, with the passage of time, become fantastic. So this is basically like, when the act of like unpacking the everyday things, the everyday objects, eventually when you keep unpacking like what it is, like what it's made of, or what it means to some people, to some cultures in different contexts, it can become something, quite fantastic, because not like one object or topic or project or whatever, when different people read it, and depends who you are, where you're from, it can mean very different things. So don't really underestimate like something that may seem quite boring or mundane, basically. Next. So seeing through objects. So object design is something that I think we both quite like, because it's a very workable scale that you can do as a student to try and make things. So it's not like you're expected to build a huge building, right? And sometimes it can be quite overwhelming as well, because we are maybe tied down so much of like, oh, the building has to be this, has to comply to this. But so when you try to downsize your concept into objects, it can still convey the meaning that you intended for it to convey to your audience or whoever is reading it. So this is quite an interesting object here. I think Sam told me it's a traditional thing to catch a quail, So I mean, like, we like to see objects like this because, I mean, it's like, it didn't have to be this complicated, but all these things in its local context and time and history, it has meaning. Like the material, the sort of pattern that it has. Next. Sam? Okay. So these are some of the other contemporary objects that we kind of sort of like, and they all have meanings. for different people as well. Next. So this was these are like sort of stuff that I and Sam did during our masters. So the left is Sam's for his project on his first year of masters. He did a police academy for drone training that was actually hidden in a standard old Victorian suburbia kind of townhouses. And mine was on the right is mine that was based off the idea of replicating monuments. And this was, the point of this is to say that we actually made this to try and convey just that one message that we wanted the like who we're trying to convey to, like that concept of ours. So Sam began with like his kiwi as like something that navigates, like, you know, Sam. Okay, I can't. I know he experimented with making his animals. Is he concerned? I tak ingat lah apa yang cakap saya dengan kiwi tu.
It's basically macam it was testing out the idea of apa tu macam macam before it became the police drone training center, it actually was an idea for a taxidermy zoo. Yeah, but we just playing on the idea of like this is like extinct animal lah, kiwi. Not extinct lah, but macam a rare animal that can't fly. Was just a humor on the future of technology that is more maybe naturalistic in a manner. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically it, you know, these things, like your projects can exist as different, like a different lifetime for itself, like different meanings as well. So as you said, it was initially, the project started off as something else, but eventually when we started to push rationalize towards the end of our first year of masters, that it became something else as well.
Yep.
But it was still relevant. It's not something that you throw away from the process, that you know, it was
the idea continues lah. Yeah.
So we're coming into our next project about Chongkat. So this project was actually for a show in Singapore that gave us the brief about play and architecture. So not necessarily building. It can be it can come in any forms, but we would the brief wanted us to explore those two topics. So we decided to go with the traditional game of Chongkat and try to fit it as a device for the city, in a sense, and also redefine it in a way. Next, Sam. So we came up with this. It's basically like a table scale Chongkat, modern Chongkat in a sense, or in some way. But when we tried to explore this, it was actually quite difficult. But we kind of sort of just went along with our gut and tried to express it as we were making it and just producing it. Sometimes it really helps to just stop when you have the idea, and just try to make it, you know, because when you make it when it takes a physical form, the act of making it, sometimes it gives it a different texture and feel to the thing that you're trying to make. And so I think that's what happened with us. So we were actually stuck, but we're like, oh, let's just make it. And, you know, we just go along with it. Because in the end, the product for ours, we had to produce it anyway. So, and we were running out of time. So in a sense, that sort of helped us push into investigating. So we were actually making as we were designing as well, if that makes sense. So it kind of ran in tandem.
Yeah. So it's actually a play set to help you understand, well, not understand lah, basically to help you play with the urban condition lah. So basically we're imagining the Chongkat as basically just containers as vessels lah, but instead of using marbles, you use like pieces from the urban environment, like playgrounds, and then you try and create your own play landscape in negotiation with the other player to play on your congkak punya playscape. So it's a device lah. It's a
Mm.
play device. So we wanted it to be more of a device actually, where uh, it reads as something that you might use to figure out something, or just to play as a method of maybe understanding or learning about how to negotiate with one another in terms of making an own imaginary urban landscape lah. Because the scale permits it to be like that lah. So it's like you can be from a player point of view, but and then you can also dive in and imagine it as a small city sort of. So it was more of that nature lah. It's quite interesting, this one. I mean, it's a surprisingly okay product lah for the time that
Yeah.
we were given. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, this was in second round of lockdown, 20,
Yes,
mid after 2020. It was
yes,
a big hassle to do actually. So
and then
we
it was
managed.
in between lockdowns, trying to ship it to Singapore. That was nightmare lah.
Yeah, that was nightmare. Okay, next. So I think many are probably familiar with this project. This is like example of like taking something that's banal to probably most people, but injecting or giving a new way of seeing what it is. So we decided to explore about the issue of plastic pollution in Malaysia, um, and trying to make turning something ugly perhaps to most people into something that's not necessarily beautiful, but something that has more meaning into it. Like, why is it that way? Like, why is it very like randomized and messy? So as you know, like Malaysia was or is still like one of the dumping sites for like UK and US plastics. So we actually have a lot of their trash, and we wanted to try to make trash into a really nice material. So we did this with the classic Bunku, like in the mama, that red one, particular red one, and we wanted it to be quite fun and something that was easy to transport. Hence, taking just that act of tapau air, tapau makanan, and all that, and try to translate that into a design move in a sense. So we had a slot on top of on the seating plane where you can slot your air kat tepi, and you would have like slots for like the shoulder handle, lat strap, and all that, and carry it around. And the idea was for it to be flat pack as well, so hence why it's quite thin, and you could pack it into your sort of maybe not A3, maybe like that sort of IKEA bag that's quite squarish, which isn't very big, so it's quite handy. So this was more of a playful take, but also bringing forth about the issue about plastics and it for its potential to be a new material going forward. Next. So with that, we actually from just that exploration with the plastics, we started to explore other things and try to give another meaning into it. So you shouldn't like limit yourself to that. It's just that. I think these were just attempts at us creating a different kind of aesthetic furniture with the leftover plastic material. Next. Tom?
Dah tukar, dapat tak?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm lagging. So this project was an installation for Urbanscapes, I think.
Yeah.
The site is in the back alley of Medan Pasar, so we were, not to say we got the worst sites, but actually it very well suited our theme because we want to talk about plastic pollution of the ocean. but it might not be that obvious that it's that, because it looks quite strange. But we try to sort of translate that look and feel through like the use of the net, the fishing net, and like the plastic trash that you might find in the sea and all that. But we didn't want to like sort of make it that obvious, so we collaborated with another friend who did the projection of like um, of being under the sea. So if you go next, you can see the photos like with the projection light on against the installation. So there. So at night, I think at night is much more effective because the alley is really dark and like quite dodgy. But then like you arrive at this installation that there's a projection against it with fish swimming through, and we wanted people to sort of experience like being in the middle of that. You know, this is probably a way to reach to people who are maybe not so in touch with maybe visual art and all that. So this is sort of like how to say not
Uh,
just simplify, but make it a bit more accessible. I think its meaning, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's not really like that difficult to decipher in a way, but it's still experiential, and it talks about the issues behind it. It can make them think.
Mm.
So next.
It's actually a small piece actually, but
Yeah.
because of lighting, because of the nature of the alleyway, I
Yeah.
think it provided quite a presence for the location it was lah. It was
Yeah.
in. Yeah, and then after that everything was recycled again. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's no waste to that lah. So it's just a simple way to try test out ideas and
A different scale as well.
a different scale as well. Yeah, sometimes I mean different types of narratives or story require different scale, I would say.
Mm.
Not everything works at the same scale. Not all stories work spatially lah at the same scale. Some work at maybe much more concentrated scale like a furniture. Some stories might require building, some might require just a small installation. So it's really about the scale lah. So that goes to the next project, which is art installation lah, I would say. For a show centered around the topic of May 13, 1969. So this is a part of the show Maywe in where's that gallery in
Tun Perak.
Tompera, yeah,
Ah, Tun
Tompera,
Perak.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the topic was big. The topic was May 13. Heavy issue lah for the nation, and also historically it has a lot of loaded connotations to it. So I think with this one, what we wanted to do was to basically make it quite personal, make it quite intimate to an individual punya story. So this is about a person's story, or what we understood as the recollection of her memories lah. So you could say this is like a memory palace lah, of the stories that she told, that she went through. So it's basically an old wheelchair of the person, and on it like are like objects lah. So you can go in the veil to macam where you can experience like a sort of a enclosed area lah. So on it are three objects, which is a folded flag, a feathered crest, and a balustrade, an old house balustrade lah. So it's essentially trying to just give so each of these objects are essentially its own stories within the narrative of the person, within the idea of her memory, which is this veil lah. So in context to May 13, so I think it's talking about May 13, but it's talking in a much more personal, uh humanistic way lah, away from the politics the and that side of which 13 May is centered around. So it's just macam maybe narratives as a way to redirect an audience into seeing something differently, even if it's a topic that's associated with something quite heavy lah. So so I don't know if you can see this, but it's actually a view from the first floor looking down into the installation below. So the first floor work is actually a floor full of salt lah. And this is it inside looking up. So it's quite an intimate thing lah. So another one is the work in Balai Seni. So this is more, we're going towards, I think this one is more artwork than product design or actually uh installations lah. So in this artwork we wanted to portray the idea of PPR negligence. So basically flat perkeliling or flat, any flats lah in Malaysia
Mm.
punya negligence. It's just highlighting the issue of negligence in not not trying to point fingers at anyone, but it's just a reading of it, and bringing the built environment punya issues into a gallery like Balai Seni. I think as architects, as background architects, it's important to somehow bring topics that we're familiar with, but to present it in a different way, like take something
Mm.
from the built environment, put it in a different context. Because we have something that macam we know so much, but then we talk about it within architecture circles, but then it's not presented,
Mm.
uh, or it's not shown to a different audience besides our circle, which is like a bubble. But then how do you open it to a much bigger audience, like say a public crowd, like and macam Balai Seni is one of the ways at that time in which we could actually present it lah. So it's actually it's sort of to emulate the space of being. If you've ever been inside, one of those the voids of a flat uh,
Mm.
PPR, it's actually it feels quite claustrophobic, in the middle looking up, and we wanted to actually humanize that scale within the settings of a gallery. So it's still spatial in a sense. We're still bringing that spatial aspect into it. I think that's something that is evident throughout our works. It's always spatial. It's always something that you can feel. Uh, I think what's interesting about the scale of an installation is that it is a moment in a spatial time. Like if you think about how like buildings, and a buildings is a series of spatial sequences, and so an installation can be just a distillation of that sequences into one. Macam you're focusing on just one experience out of the whole building, and that can become your installation lah, the space. So I mean that's why I think we're interested in the idea of installations. So this is one of the other artists in Balai Seni. So he's feeling the installation, even though he can't see it. He's blind. Daniel is blind, so his wife is bringing him around within the space to spatially experience the space as he understands it by himself. It's quite interesting, really, of how people read things. So narratives change from person to person according to what your condition are, what you understand about the world. And I think it's interesting to explore narratives in that manner.
Yeah, I if I can add that, I think
Mm,
like when, for example, when that was produced, like the point is to reach it to a public in that to to a product that they understand. Like, so spatial, like we're trying to maybe invoke some level of empathy into it, because when you read like about these issues in the news, sometimes we're so desensitized from it because we don't live it. Like, we
mm,
don't live it, we're privileged enough to not live it, but I think because we have the spatial skills to translate that, I think that's maybe something that we should do more of now, like,
mm,
so
mm.
yeah.
Because if you think about it, not a lot of people can actually hire architects.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not actually accessible lah, macam as a profession for normal people to hire architects. It's macam, but what if you could actually bring a fragment of that skill and share it to the public, of what you know about spatial experience, transfer it into other contexts. I think that's a valuable skill that we can share lah.
Mm.
So going into our one of our references among a lot of references is Christo and Jean Claude. So basically, they're two artists now passed away, but I think they've been quite influential in how we see projects or how we see large scale art installation as architecture. So these are the both of them when they were young. And this is one of the projects essentially. What is interesting about Christo's project is that they take a long time. You see them quite like banal lah, actually. They're quite banal. It's just covering things up. You know, if you when we show you later on lah, macam it's simple things out, which is actually, if you think about it, it's actually quite simple to do construction wise. But because it's so useless and absurd within the context of the urban or wherever it's placed, that there's a lot of ridicule for it. Like, why would you spend public money, or not public money, it's their own money, but why would you place something like this within a context lah? So this is the process of the mastaba lah. So the mastaba is one of the projects that they initiated in UAE, Emirates, but it was never realized lah for a very long time, like 10 years or something. So this is a model of it. The UC Crystal placing it in the context of a desert, trying to take a nice picture. And then years later, somehow that didn't happen. But and then through, I don't know, through luck or sheer perseverance, they actually managed to transpose it on in
Hyde
London,
Park.
in on Hyde Park in London. So it actually manifested as an actual installation of basically just piled barrels in the shape of a truncated pyramid. If you think about it, it's actually useless lah. Macam why would anyone do something like this? An architect would definitely don't won't do anything like this lah, because there's no function other than to alter the fabric of reality for a moment of what is considered normal life lah, just to twist that narrative of normality, and making you see a different angle to life. And it goes for all their projects, like running fans, like an endless border fence of just white sheetings as a border all over the landscape. It's absurd, it's expensive, it absolutely doesn't make sense. But I think for Christo, it's absolutely necessary for him to demonstrate this as a narrative, that this can exist at that moment in time, uh, and it has existed in the world as a sort of a change in the story of people who visited or who've seen this. The same as Reichstag. Like, it's interesting that Reichstag is a parliament lah, is a German parliament. It is related to a whole set of different stories related to German, Nazism, German reunification after Cold War. So it has a lot of history. But when he wrapped this up for about 2 weeks or something, uh, the meanings of it changed into an object. So, and then the viewers, we are able to project our meanings towards it. So there you have momentarily an erasure of history lah. And for a moment, macam you're able to read it differently, in your own way. And I think for most of Christo's project, that's what it is. And I think one of the quote sums it up the best. All our work is about freedom. Freedom is the enemy of possession, and possession is equal to permanence. This is why our projects cannot remain and must go away forever. Our projects are once in a lifetime and once upon a time. So for him, it's the need to realize this narrative at least once in a lifetime, to see it once upon a time. I think it's very powerful from Christo, especially since he's not an architect, but he's very attuned to the architectural scale. I think there's fragments of their works in what we do as we show after this one. So another point is that seeing through issues. So I think since you guys are looking into issues, right? I think it's important to find your own way of looking into issues. I think the highlight is to not focus on everything. Find the thing that you are interested in, that you can highlight, that you can respond to well. I think the over assumption with macam when students do narrative architecture in Malaysia is that it has to be complicated. but it's not, macam of course you're referencing Bartlett lah, you're referencing macam other schools punya work. It looks complex, but they took a lot of time to digest it. But in essence, I think the real challenge for you guys in taking something complex and making it simple, I think that's where intelligence lie actually, in making real complex ideas simple enough for people to get. And that's a challenge even trying to translate into an architectural proposition lah. So for example, for this project, uh, we reference the issue of the US Mexico wall. Of course, at that time Trump was in charge, president of the United States. He wanted a border which the Mexicans should pay for. So then we took the idea lah. We took the idea because there was an open call for ideas for a border. So we just proposed, macam, what if we propose a border as something which is not a delineating type of element? What if a border could be a permeable sort of meeting ground between both sides, where you could congregate, share a meal, where the idea of the border dissolves while still being a border in a way. So we just projected that out, and somehow it got quite a interesting reaction, I would say. Uh, later on, we found out that JR, an artist, also did this installation along the US Mexico border, which is essentially very simple. It's just a picnic. You just like throw, essentially a big cloth, and then both sides of the fence can actually dine in as a sort of a big picnic. And then that thing is remarkable, macam things that macam is spatial, but you don't need to build a building, you don't need to build a complex per se to bring people together. I think it's in finding that moments for us is interesting. It's not always about building structures. You can solve really big issues with really simple means. So for example, this one is another example, a brilliant example. It won design of the year uh, at the design museum last, I don't know, 2 3 years. So essentially what the architect did was to install seesaws just in between the fence, and then both sides played. And then macam at that moment, somehow you can see a change in values, a change in hopes and dreams for both sides, and that goes beyond what any large civic building can do. And I think that's really powerful in trying to get something really quite elemental and human and simple, and uh trying to place it in a really complex situation. So for us, seeing that is quite exciting lah. Macam it got on design as part of 5 designs that tried to challenge Trump's border wall, including the seesaw one. I think it's quite interesting. So we like it when we try to challenge uh when we try to challenge the general narrative of the day, and can
Mhm.
can there be new narratives that we can present from our perspective. I think Malaysians, we have unique different perspectives that we don't always share. It's a shame really, because we have a lot of, due to of his history, due to our multiracial upbringing, due to our macam, we've been under a lot colonial rule. We've had a rich history with the rest of Southeast Asia. I think we really have to bring out the best of that, I think. So this was basically another project. This is basically a homage to Christo and Jean Claude. Basically, what we did was to wall out the Statue of Liberty. Not sure if this is playing. So it's essentially trying to question the wall, not the wall, Statue of Liberty. Sorry, basically, it was in 2020 last year that we sort of imagined this proposal. So it was in response to the whole Black Lives Matter movement and the whole upheaval around the world around about racial inequality. So it's a question about liberty and what does U.S. liberty stand for at that moment in time. So this is a technical drawing of it. It's actually simple, you know. It's just walling up the Statue of Liberty. It's not crazy. It's not like it doesn't cost that much, to be honest. But it will be impossible to build because it's just the fact that it just has a lot of connotations, a lot of red tape, bureaucracy tied to it. Because this is an illustration of it. Yeah. So this is another project that we're responding to, basically the treatment of Uyghur Muslims by the Chinese state government in China. So this was our issue at mass incarceration of Muslim Uyghurs, and we thought of playing with the idea of how they were always portraying it as a sort of a positive light for Uyghurs in terms of indoctrination, and that it's just a better way for them to be introduced to the larger state agenda. So we thought, macam, oh, we might as well try to posit a sort of sarcastic angle towards it and create a facility, a fictional facility. So Welcome to Uyghur Wonderland is what the facility is. It's actually a take on utopian projects as well by past architects. I think we love, I don't know, architects love the idea of the utopia, right? Because it presents such a desirable thing to lust over, like an expansive plot of land open to interpretation, and but it's actually just absolute control by a singular vision. So we wanted to critique that in a way. So we designed this. Maybe Aja, you want to explain more?
Okay. So I guess for this project, we tackled it like an architecture project, like as we would do in masters.
Mm,
Just as a side note, I think we didn't have much time on this project, but because of like the collage that you earlier saw, that actually became the driver for all our design elements that appear here, or at least we just pushed it and did so in terms of translating into design element or project, or because we knew that we wanted it to be some sort of like a wonderland um, kind of feel into it. So with that in mind, we expressed it into this large compound kind of facility. But yeah, anyway, so this is sort of maybe also talking about how architecture can be quite oppressive. Like it is, like architecture is what it is at like as a tool, like in the hands of its maker lah. So um what's here is that in the center, like there that little pink palace, it rotates as according to what the Chinese state government may impose on the Uyghur Muslims. Like they determine like the what they do during the day and what they have to do. Like they it's agriculture time, so and then they go back home, or they have to sort of like do song and dance class or whatever, or like those kind of very oppressing kind of activities. That's true.
it's like, yeah, but it's presented in a way that macam at certain times of day they have to entertain
Mm,
to show that maybe macam they're still retaining the culture, but and then it
yeah,
shifts to the accommodation at night, but and then it shifts to maybe a production facility at a certain time of the day. So
yeah,
it's quite Hunger Games if you think about it in that way lah. It's like a very totalitarian sort of
yeah.
environment.
It's quite dark lah,
It's quite
because in
dark
the
lah.
in
Yeah.
the in the media, the state government, they present it as though like they're doing something good for these people, but actually it's to us it's not, like, or at least how we know of it. So hence
Mm,
this kind of sarcastic approach and expression of it as an architecture project. This is what we responded with
mm.
towards that issue.
Yep.
So like yeah.
I mean, yeah lah, macam there's there's a lot of approaches to
Mm,
look to taking up the approach of architecture projects lah. Macam you could respond positively, you could even respond as a critique to something. It
mm,
doesn't have to be all productive. It doesn't. Sometimes, what if the approach of that architecture was to question people's values?
mm,
Uh, it might not solve anything, but it just makes you question what is the issue of the day, and maybe you've taken it for granted, and maybe that just opens up a different angle for you to see it. So for example, the last example, so this is ending towards the end, guys, so don't worry. So I like I actually like this image very much because it's like very James Bond. It's like very 007. You can imagine, oh no, this is one of Bond villains punya boat, right? So if you guys are in tune with what's been happening with the last maybe 5 years of Malaysia, this is one of the boats that was bought by the embezzled funds of 1MDB. So this is the Equanimity. Yeah, that's the name of the boat. So in essence, we try to distill down an idea of how would you manifest embezzled funds from a national basically trust fund of what 1.7 billion USD or something. How would you manifest that physically? Because macam all of us, most of us can't actually imagine what that amount uh represents. So we were thinking, what if you just took the boat that is bought from the embezzled funds, and then you put it on the side of the Malaysian Pavilion Expo in, where is it now? It's in Dubai. Yes. So for 2020, well, we know it's not going to happen lah. But it's just interesting, like how can you turn around a situation and basically make people realize that, oh, this is physically what goes into some of the money of 1.7 billion USD. So this is what it is basically. So we represented it as the ship itself as a pavilion where people could come on board, see what you get with that amount of money. You can see like maybe paintings of what can be bought, like a Basquiat on the wall. You could maybe bathe in cash. Experience the lifestyle for a bit, and maybe experience what it's like to actually understand the spoils of riches. So yeah, we it got picked up by Dizine, which is quite interesting. But of course, we all know what is realized at the end of the day for the Malaysian Pavilion lah. And then yeah, but it was never meant to be realized, but meant to question that value of and making a critique out of it lah. And especially as a critique on Pavilion Expos, which actually costs a lot of money and isn't really beneficial as a building. So how would you turn that thing around on its head and see it differently as what a function of a pavilion is supposed to be, of the whole expo idea anyway. So cheers to that. So towards the end, we wanted to highlight, I guess, these processes for you guys. It could be different to according to individual, but these are it lah. So be aware of things, issues or happenings which are interesting to you. Pick issues that resonates with you and that you can focus on. You don't have to solve everything. You don't even have to solve it in a positive manner, I think. So distill and reach clarity of ideas. I think this is the important part. But you can get 1,001 threads of issues, but reaching that clarity of idea is important. Macam you could single out something and really think of a solution for that, and that could be it for your whole project. You don't need to think about how do I get 10 issues into this building. You just need to think of one and solve it quite successfully. So and then decide the medium to respond with. So I think I know I understand that because most of you guys are at home. You're stuck to the computer, right? You're stuck to the digital interface. But I mean, think for a moment, how best would you try to explore this issue? is it through videos? Is it through a short movie? Is it through models? Is it through writings? Because I think macam a lot of people don't realize that writing is a powerful design tool, because we believe that some things can only be designed in writing, can only exist as writing, because when you put it into physical, it's just a different it's just a different reading lah. So and then we would say disseminate your ideas into, I think macam one of the important points also from us when we were studying is that your projects should live beyond your classroom. I think that's
Mm.
important. It shouldn't be kept as macam just to get an A. You should be able to use it beyond your classroom to, I don't know, post it on social media, get get like conversation starting, just something lah. But I don't think you should just limit all your hard work into getting a grade. And I think you guys are more tech savvy than we are. I think you guys are much more attuned to how you guys can disseminate your work online through a lot of mediums. I don't know. I try only add anything.
Um, yeah, sometimes like or at least in our experience, some of like the really good design projects when we were studying and all that, they they were usually more of a personal take to the person, and that included like our unit mates who like did the design. Like it was just, they're very amazing work, but it was because like it was relative to something that they cared about or an
Mm,
issue that they cared about, but
yep.
it had them in it. I don't know how to explain it, but those are
Their,
the
their
best.
their characters are in it.
Yes,
Yes.
there are characters in it. You're not conforming to like a certain style. That's fine. Like if you like certain styles of architecture that you like, but it's not about like copy pasting, but to show what is your understanding and interpretation as a designer, like whether it's like physically designing it or I don't know, or turning it into your own interpretation. That's what would make the design special, because it just comes out when you try to add yourself in it, and then you can see it in the drawing or like your models and stuff like that. It
Mm,
just becomes very obvious, and those are the kind of best designs. And also, and earlier saying about like simple moves, like how Christo does, it's a very simple move of what he does on his work, but in the context of what he did it on, that made it even much more powerful, i.e. that Berlin building, you
mm,
know.
mm. True, true.
Exactly. Yeah. So what's everyone's new narrative, basically?
Mm,
And that's what you probably should question yourself every time when as you go through your doing your projects, or like what you're trying to impart. At least the point is not to impose just your viewpoint. It should at least be inviting for others to start a conversation on you about it. It can, even if it's a criticism or like they don't agree with your viewpoint, that's fine, because um, they're entitled to say about it. But we should be taking it in and digesting it and trying to understand why do they see it that way. In a
mm,
sense,
mm,
the point is to create conversation, because that's where the development always happens, I think.
mm. I think macam when you talk about narrative, it's essentially storytelling, and
Mm,
but a storytelling doesn't work if there's no audience.
mm, mm, mm,
Because that's the whole idea of storytelling. You're telling it to someone, or
yeah.
else it just becomes like telling to yourself lah, which is not storytelling. So
Mm,
you need to macam remember that it's always about a discussion. A narrative is also open to your interpretation. Is
mm,
also open to other people's opinions on it.
mm,
There's no singular viewpoint of things lah in the world lah. Macam there's my view, there's your view, there's her view, but and then of course we can come together for certain views, but we can also disagree on certain views. Yep. So yeah, questions. Yeah, that's it.